Good morning. It's Pop again, Dennis Murray. Today is Popcast 81. It's called Nature's Wisdom, Part 31. Um, I just had another interesting experience, a new one for me. Um, I'm just double checking to make sure the mic is on. I recorded a podcast. I just finished recording it and started to watch it. Um, and it was about 25 minutes long, and it had some, interesting things to it, and only the first 3 or 4 minutes of it recorded, and then it just stopped. I had the mic on, and something happened. I must have touched something, done something. Who knows? It's my fault. It's a very common feeling on my part, um, and not without some cause. A lot of times when things get screwed up, it's because of something I did or failed to do. So uh, I don't allow that to take too large a role in my deeper life. But on the surface, I have to chuckle about it because it quite often is the case that something I did, I don't know what, in any event, so I had to erase it because um, it didn't record, so there wasn't any point in having 4 minutes worth. Um, but as usual, I expect that my second take will be better than that one anyway. I was whining a little bit in that one, in all honesty, and I'm not much of a whiner, but I sort of felt like I had run out of a little steam. In all honesty, it's time for practicalities, and I'm not very good at practicalities. And it's time for, coming up with a clever plan for how these ideas could actually be taken out into the real world and put to use. And, I just kind of felt like, oh, goodness, I don't know how much I have to say about that. And that's, so it left me feeling a little bit like I'm running out of steam. But in the middle of it, I started realizing that um, there's a huge there's a huge amount of things that we could think about uh, changing for the better in our current social arrangements. Um, and my what started me thinking that was something about one of the things we do to how do we relate to people whose fears grown into hate or whose intellect has grown to arrogance. And I began with, well, in the case of violence, um, which led me to talk about prisons. And the more I talked about it, the more I realized that, wait a minute, I've got a variety of things about our present social arrangements that I want to talk about in the light of nature's wisdom. And so I found my energy, and I'm very happy about that. Um, it's going to be different, going forward because I'm just speculating about ways things could be rearranged or about problems with the current arrangements. And it's not going to be as valuable a contribution as the creating a different view of nature's wisdom, which I have, been working on doing thus far, is, in my opinion. I think that a different view of nature's wisdom is a real useful contribution that in the hands of all of us could be of help in living our own lives and in having a greater effect on the gift of each other. And but particular conversations about, well, this arrangement has problems, and here's some of the problems, and here's some possibilities for how they could be done better. They're of a second tier level of usefulness. I don't misunderstand that. I'm not very practical. I'm not at all worth having as an administrator. I'm not a natural leader. Um, so this is just going to be some interesting conversations that perhaps help, give us more appreciation of nature's wisdom by talking out some of, well, how might you apply it? So, so it seems to me that the starting point for a practical application of our thoughts about nature's wisdom is that there are two large groups that are connected to this great divide in particular ways, and both of them could play a role to help build the great divide or help lessen it. And at the moment, they both play a significant role in helping build it. One group is the professors at the great liberal universities in the United States, and the other is the clergy. The professors could gain an appreciation for the limits of analytical intelligence and the necessity for the subjective gifts of our psychology, our intuitive making sense of the world by experiencing awe and personifying the awe in most cases, and getting hope from it and turning towards each other, so that we get energy and direction from our psychology, but it's all subjective. And liberal intellectuals tend to want to stay as objective as possible. So is it possible that we could get them to see that there's a lot of value to the subjective and start taking that on in their thoughts, in their conversations with each other, in their interior conversations and those with their students, and even if they simply open it as, well, here's an idea from a guy who used to be a liberal intellectual, but now he's gone over to the common sense side, and so we don't really have a lot of respect for him, but still, he's put these ideas out. Maybe we could think about those for a while just to amuse ourselves. I don't know. Can we reach the professors? Like I said, I don't have any practical skill for organizing, like a TED talk or getting a group together. I have no gift for administration, and et cetera. So I don't know how we would reach the professors, but I do think that it is a way to go forward that would at least have a chance of getting a foothold, and would, even if presented as ideas from the other side, of course, there seems to be a natural reluctance to even allow ideas from the other side to be spoken on liberal campuses nowadays. So you have to get through that reluctance as well. So you can see that it's not going to be an easy nut to crack. All I can say is it seems like one of the key ways to proceed is to try and reach the professors, try to get on campus. Typically, when I was in college, there were movements that somebody had started that, had, some kind of office someplace in the large cities, and published, brochures. I mean, in the old days, you actually used to print a piece of paper and pass it out in the hallways. So-and-so's ideas, so-and-so movement, and there's a meeting Thursday at this address. So I went to, a couple of those meetings, and I was, it helped open my eyes to various points of view, and, gets the young person with a desire to, contribute to the way the world is arranged, feelings in me. And so, but I'm not the one to start a movement. There may be some among you who know how to do that. I want to identify, it seems to me, that there are these two large groups that are worth trying to figure out how to reach. And one of the groups is the professors of our great liberal universities. Um, and the other is clergy. Um, the clergy can see in the light of nature's wisdom that the hate mongering and fear mongering that's going on some media um, is actually harmful to living a religiously admired and respected life. It doesn't live up to the high standards of religions. Religions ask that we have the widest possible reach of the definition of us and the smallest of them, and that we very much live the gift of each other. But this cottage industry of hate mongers, and the clergy has not taken a stance. For the most part, it's probably wise for clergy to stay out of politics. But this isn't just politics, it's a great social divide, way beyond politics. And it may be that the two sides have identified with two major political parties, but that's almost coincidental. It's just using the parties to suit a social animosity that's grown out of all proportion. And viewing it as a social animosity calls for the clergy to involve themselves in it. So there's a huge amount of issues that have moral aspects to them involved in the Great Divide. Issues like birth control, abortion, homosexuality, and you might well feel that you still are not ready to give up ideas that were prevalent 50, 100 years ago about those matters. And you might well feel that you're being faithful to your religion in that regard. And what we'd be asking clergy is not to give up whatever particular set of ideas they have about the best way to live the gift of each other, and whatever opposition they may have to changes that liberals have tried to bring into society for the last 70, 100 years. But instead to view that the process is one that must be conducted in the highest traditions of the religion, viewing the opposite point of view as coming from people with whom we want to have a fruitful relation because they're other people. And we want to extend the gift of each other to all. We want to have them be zero and us be 100%. And that's the highest teaching of all of the religions of the world. And it's exemplified by the Golden Rule. And, for me, I have a, modified version of the Golden Rule. The Golden Rule could be expressed as love one another. And as I've said, the word love has a particular a meaning for me. It includes, family and friends and people I know well, not people I don't know. So I don't use that phrase, love one another, as the definition of the Golden Rule. I use share hope with one another. And that seems to me to be grounded in our psychology. This is the best we can have between us. because sharing the hope means we're led back to the awe inside us where the hope comes from. And it dissolves the great divide about intellect, as intellect only, for example, on one side, or, the old time religion on the other, because it brings everybody to being reminded of the role of the sacred in our psychology. And of course, we live from our psychology. And it leaves people disagreeing as to whether the sacred exists outside our psychology or not. But it leads them all to agree that from within our psychology, there is most assuredly sacredness. And it seems to be characteristic of us and of the world. And we take uh, all of our life starts from this sense of the sacred and of the hope it gives us and of the um, turning towards each other as a gift for extra support and encouragement that we need in order to live in the face of death, hate, necessity, and uncertain and unfairness. So, we would leave the disputes about whether there's an external God or just a God in our psychology, but we would all come together on the idea of the sacred at the center of our psychology. And that allows us to end the great divide and make our differences be honest differences between people. That makes a lot of sense that there are differences because we're each interpreting the awe individually through the filter of our own life, our own experience. So I do think that we could give an argument to the clergy that could be respected, from a clerical point of view, um, that there is a way forward, and it blesses and affirms that there is the sacred in all of us, and that it is what we start from in our life, and what we want to share with each other, and it leaves us with all our differences in point of view that follow from that. But it gives us that in common. So I think that we have something to say to clergy uh, that might open hearts and minds. And then the clergy could possibly preach that listening to the spewing of the hate is probably not a good thing, and encourage people to turn off media that are spewing hate. Just as we would like the professors to say, well, that media that is so filled with intellectual arrogance that they're uh, harshly viewing those that don't follow the intellectual's point of view as being less than fully human, that media is not helping either. And so that we have a way to ask both professors and clergy have an effect on the media. Um, encourage your folks to look critically at media and start turning it off as need be. And startlingly, that will very quickly change media. They'll hire different people and they'll take different tacks because they exist as a business. They're only about money at heart. And of course, they have the purity of their ideas. The other guy's evil, the other guy's stupid. And we need to get rid of both of those ideas. The seeking of that kind of purity comes at too high a price. It puts the divide between people who should be part of us, and it makes us and them. And it's harmful. It's profoundly harmful. It's precisely against nature's wisdom. So, some thoughts to get started with practicalities. Professors and clergy are two groups we can identify as probably worth approaching. And we have a reasonable hope that the expression of nature's wisdom that we've come up with, might reach their hearts and minds and cause them to rethink where they are and what they're saying to their people, and what they're encouraging them to do or not do. I want to end with um, the general question about how do we relate to people whose fear has grown into hate or whose intellect has grown to arrogance, and leave it there as really important general question that we'll talk more about tomorrow. Okay, take care. Bye bye.